felt like the financial system is essentially just a rigged game?
Oh man, yeah. I think a lot of people are feeling that right now.
Right, like you are running on this treadmill that just keeps, speeding up. It's like a machine designed to quietly, almost invisibly drain the value of your actual physical labor.
Hour by hour, year by year.
Exactly. And while your purchasing power shrinks, you just have to watch it simultaneously reward bureaucrats and insiders.
People and institutions that don't actually produce anything physical in the real world.
Right, exactly. Welcome to another deep dive, everyone. Today we are taking you, the listener, straight into the heart of that exact feeling. We are reviewing a highly provocative, freshly published 2025 ebook that honestly, it promises to completely decode this entire modern financial matrix.
Yeah, and I have to say, it is a text that does not pull a single punch. I mean, it is explicitly designed to be uncomfortable.
Oh, highly uncomfortable.
It really wants to challenge your base assumptions and completely reframe our entire understanding of what money actually is, like at a fundamental, almost atomic level.
It really does. And right at the top, I want to ask you to please hit that like and subscribe button for this deep dive so we can keep bringing you these really intense, unfiltered explorations.
Absolutely.
Our mission today is to thoroughly unpack this book. It's called Energy Money, Bitcoin, the True Cryptocurrency, and the Coming Bull Market to Solve Humanity's Money Problems, and it's by Conrad Riker.
It's a massive title for a massive topic.
It is. We are going to explore the author's core thesis on how our legacy financial institutions were, historically constructed, and how, in his very specific view anyway, they have been entirely captured.
Yeah, he argues these systems have been overrun by what he describes as feminist and Marxist ideologies.
Which is a wild claim to make about economics, but he goes there. He says they've replaced hard mathematical physics with what he calls feelings-based fiat currency.
It's a very intense perspective.
It is. And I can promise you this is going to be an incisive, ultra-long, and completely fascinating exploration. It's going to make you want to grab a copy of this book immediately.
But before we go one step further, we really need to pause and issue a mandatory impartiality disclaimer here.
Yes, very important.
This deep dive covers material that is, frankly, highly politically charged.
Yeah.
Riker's book dives headfirst into incredibly sensitive topics regarding gender dynamics, left-wing and Marxist political policies, and themes that are very heavily associated with right-wing politics in the manosphere.
Yeah, and we want to make it crystal clear to you, the listener, right now.
Yeah.
We are strictly impartial. We are not taking sides today.
Grab all.
We are not endorsing the political, social, or economic viewpoints of the author. Our sole purpose in this deep dive is to faithfully, analytically, and, objectively report on the ideas contained in the original source material.
We just want to help you understand Riker's arguments and his worldview exactly as he constructed it on the page.
Exactly. Our job here is just the analysis and synthesis of the text provided. We are mapping out his arguments, examining the historical and technical evidence he uses to support them.
And laying it all out so you can evaluate the strength of his claims completely for yourself.
Perfectly said. Now, if you want to follow along with this paradigm-shifting worldview as we break it down, we strongly encourage you to check Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books right now to buy the ebook Energy Money.
Highly recommend having the text in front of you.
Yeah, and also, if you want to understand the author's ongoing perspective, do yourself a favor and follow him on Substack at Conrad Riker. Okay, let's unpack this. The book kicks off by demanding a massive paradigm shift from the reader.
Huge shift.
Riker argues that money isn't a political tool, and economics shouldn't even be classified as a social science. He says money is, fundamentally, thermodynamics.
Yeah, and that is the foundational pillar upon which his entire worldview rests. I mean, he strips away the veil of traditional economics.
No charts, no Fed meetings.
Exactly. He ignores all that and asks us to look at money purely through the lens of hard physics. Like, in physics, specifically the second law of thermodynamics, we know that entropy in a closed system always increases.
Right. Things naturally decay. They break down.
Yes, and furthermore, the first law tells us that energy cannot be created from nothing. It can only be transformed from one state to another. So Riker applies this uncompromising law of the physical universe directly to currency.
Which is fascinating. And he argues that fiat currency like the dollars, euros, or yen sitting in your checking account actually violates this physical law.
Precisely. Because the word fiat itself, it's Latin for let it be done or by decree.
It's money created by command, not by effort.
Exactly. Because central banks could just create it out of thin air, With virtually zero energy input, Riker argues it mathematically must decay. It has no physical anchor holding its value in place.
He makes a really visceral comparison here in the first chapter. He compares fiat currency to uranium-238.
Oh, the radiation metaphor, yeah.
Yeah. He says fiat money inherently decays, like it radiates away its purchasing power over time, whereas Bitcoin's half-life approaches infinity.
It's a striking metaphor, really, because it speaks to the hidden nature of the decay. When you hold a dollar bill, it looks exactly the same today as it did 10 years ago.
The physical paper hasn't changed at all.
Right, but its energetic value, what it can actually pull out of the real world economy in terms of goods and labor, is constantly evaporating. Bitcoin, on the other hand, he argues, is anchored to physical reality through a mechanism called proof of work.
Okay, right, and we really need to define how that works. Because Riker describes proof of work as a literal form of digital alchemy.
That's a great term for it.
How exactly does a computer program anchor itself to physical thermodynamics?
Well, it basically comes down to the cryptographic puzzle that the Bitcoin network demands. To add a new block of transactions to the ledger and, mint new Bitcoin, computers around the world, the miners have to guess a random, incredibly complex alphanumeric string.
It's like a massive global lottery, right?
Yeah, exactly like that. They do this by running a hashing algorithm called SHA-256 over and over again, trillions of times a second. There is no shortcut. You literally cannot cheat the math.
You just have to do the work.
Yeah, you just have to expend the raw electrical energy to power the computer chips to make the guesses.
And Riker uses a very specific mathematical comparison to drive this home, which blew my mind. He points out that to mine a single Bitcoin today, the network consumes roughly 266,000 kilowatt hours of electricity.
That is a staggering amount of power.
It really is. And to put that in perspective, he notes that this is the exact same amount of energy required to physically extract, crush, and refine 40 tons of raw gold ore out of the earth.
Wow. See, that is the alchemy he is talking about. When you hold a Bitcoin in your digital wallet, you aren't just holding a line of code or some meaningless digital token.
Right.
You are holding the cryptographic, unforgeable proof that a massive, undeniable expenditure of real-world energy actually occurred.
Like a cryptographic ingot forged by joules of electricity.
Exactly. You cannot fake the work, therefore you cannot fake the money.
That is just fascinating when you contrast it with the reality of the fiat system we currently live in. I mean, he points out the mechanics of the Federal Reserve.
Oh yeah, the contrast is stark.
When they want to expand the money supply, they don't go mine gold or solve cryptographic puzzles. They just, change numbers in a database.
Okay.
Literally a keystroke. And even when they physically print the money, Riker notes that a brand new $100 bill costs the Bureau of Engraving and Printing just 2.3 cents to produce.
As he bluntly puts it in the book, it's cheaper than high-end toilet paper.
Which is a hilarious but grim image.
But think about the implications of that 2.3 cents. The government can print trillions of dollars, as we saw during all those recent quantitative easing programs, and inject these claims on human labor into the economy without having performed any actual labor themselves.
They expended no real energy to create those claims.
None. And Riker argues this is a thermodynamic violation. You are putting fake energy into a real system, and the system inevitably reacts by diluting the value of all the existing energy.
And we experience that dilution as inflation.
Precisely. That's inflation in a nutshell.
So, to make this abstract concept of monetary decay painfully real, he brings up some really intense historical context. He talks about 1923 Weimar Germany.
The classic hyperinflation example.
Yeah, we've all seen the pictures of kids playing with blocks of cast like Legos, but Riker focuses on the housewives. He describes them literally burning stacks of paper marks in their stoves just to cook breakfast.
Because mathematically, it made thermodynamic sense. The German central bank had printed so much money to pay war reparations that the velocity of money just spun totally out of control.
The purchasing power evaporated so fast.
Yes, so fast that the actual physical energy density of the paper and ink, like its ability to generate heat when you set it on fire, became more valuable than the economic value printed on its face.
It's tragic, but like perfect illustration of his thesis. When money detaches from physics, physics eventually reclaims it.
That's exactly it. And he doesn't just leave it in the history books either. He connects Weimar directly to the modern day, looking at Nigeria in 2023.
Right, the Nigerian naira.
Yeah, the Nigerian central bank has been struggling with massive currency devaluation. I mean, Riker cites periods of 30% monthly devaluations of the naira.
30% a month.
Yeah, and he tells this incredible story of Nigerian mothers who are bypassing their central bank entirely.
Well, they have to, right, just to survive. I mean, if your money loses a third of its value every 30 days, you literally cannot save for the future. You are just trapped in the present.
Exactly. So these mothers are converting their rapidly decaying naira into what Riker beautifully calls digital calories, Bitcoin.
I love that phrase, digital calories.
It fits so well. They are doing this just to retain the nutritional, thermodynamic value of their family's wealth over time. They are looking at the fiat system, recognizing it as a dying battery, and manually transferring their labor into a thermodynamically sound battery.
And if we expand this concept of the battery to an industrial scale, Riker argues that Bitcoin isn't just about preserving individual wealth. It's a mechanism for monetizing wasted energy on a global scale.
Yes, this is a huge point in the book.
He points to the Permian Basin in Texas, which is one of the largest oil fields in the world. And this part honestly blew my mind. I didn't realize how much energy we just throw away.
It's staggering. It really is. When oil rigs drill, they frequently bring up natural gas, mostly methane, as a byproduct.
Right, just comes up with the oil.
Yeah, and in remote areas like the Permian, it is often way too expensive to build the pipelines needed to transport that gas to cities. So because they can't sell it, and they can't just vent raw methane into the atmosphere due to environmental regulations, they flare it.
They just light it on fire at the top of the pipe.
Exactly. It's totally wasted energy, just illuminating the Texas desert.
But Raker highlights how ExxonMobil and other energy giants started looking at this exact problem and realized Bitcoin was the solution.
Which is brilliant, honestly.
They started bringing containerized data centers, basically shipping containers filled with ASIC mining rigs right onto the oil fields.
Right out into the dirt.
Yeah. They take that wasted flare gas, run it through a generator to create electricity, and use that electricity to mine Bitcoin right there on site.
They turned literal waste hydrocarbons that were just burning off into the sky into $110 million in annual profit.
It's incredible.
They transformed stranded jewels into a monetary standard harder than steel.
Yeah.
And Riker uses this specific mechanical reality to completely dismantle the mainstream critique that Bitcoin, wastes energy.
Right, because that's what you always hear on the news.
Exactly. He argues it is doing the exact opposite. It is acting as a scavenger of wasted energy, a value-storing battery capturing surplus megawatts in a cryptographic lattice.
Okay, hearing all of this math and physics, it makes logical sense, but I find myself struggling with one massive reality check here.
Okay, what's that?
Well, Riker calls fiat Schrodinger's money, meaning the central bank declares it is perfectly stable right up until you go to the grocery store and realize inflation has eaten it alive.
Right, the illusion of stability.
But looking at Bitcoin, its price can drop 40 or 50% in a single month. How can you possibly argue that a currency is a thermodynamically sound store of value when its purchasing power is that violently volatile? Isn't that just a completely different kind of instability?
That is the most common pushback, and it's a fair point. Riker actually dedicates significant space to addressing this exact paradox in the book.
I'm glad he didn't just ignore it.
No, he tackles it head on. His counter-argument relies on differentiating between manipulated stability and organic price discovery.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, he argues that fiat stability is a highly manufactured illusion. It is a short-term trick achieved by central banks constantly manipulating interest rates and hiding the underlying decay by quietly expanding the money supply. Fiat is designed to be a smooth, comfortable ride down to zero. It slowly bleeds you out.
A smooth ride down to zero. That's so grim.
But accurate, according to his framework, Bitcoin's volatility, conversely, is the raw, unmanipulated reaction of a free global market trying to price a completely unprecedented asset.
Because humanity has never had an absolutely scarce, instantly verifiable, borderless asset before.
Exactly. The volatility isn't a bug in the code. It is the chaotic feature of a free market engaged in the volatile process of discovering the price of absolute scarcity.
It's supposed to be rocky.
Right. Riker argues you're being offered a choice. You can trade the false, manufactured, slow-bleeding stability of a dying fiat asset for the volatile, but mathematically guaranteed, long-term scarcity of an emerging global reserve.
Okay, so if we accept his premise that this mathematical, energy-backed money is vastly superior to paper decrees, the obvious question is, why are we still using fiat? Who is keeping this broken system alive?
And that thought process takes us directly into Riker's concept of institutional capture, which he labels the unholy trinity.
The unholy trinity. So dramatic.
Very. The unholy trinity, in Riker's taxonomy, consists of banks, states, and the media. He argues that these three pillars of society have formed a symbiotic, mutually beneficial protection racket. They have completely abandoned the hard, unforgiving math of thermodynamics in favor of a system built on what he explicitly terms Marxist and Keynesian principles of infinite debt, endless market intervention, and continuous bailouts.
Yeah, he does not hold back on his descriptions here, and his rhetoric gets highly aggressively targeted. I mean, he calls modern central banking monetary drag queen story hour.
Yeah, he really leans into the cultural framing.
He views the entire apparatus as a performative, absurd farce, where bearded academics in expensive suits print $8 trillion in pixie dust. Those are his exact words, to paper over systemic rot.
All while simultaneously deploying massive bureaucracies to punish every day working individuals for like a $600 tax discrepancy.
It's maddening when you put it like that.
He describes a system of hypernormalization, where the fraud at the top is so massive and so routine that it simply becomes accepted macroeconomic policy.
Wow.
And this is where Riker introduces a highly controversial framing, one that heavily aligns with his target audience in the manosphere. He critiques what he calls the toxic femininity of Keynesian economics.
Right, let's unpack this carefully because it's a central pillar of his cultural argument. What exactly does he mean by linking a macroeconomic school of thought like Keynesianism to toxic femininity?
To understand his argument, you have to look at the archetypes he assigns to economic behaviors. In Riker's worldview, he associates traditional masculinity with hard-coded limits, physical labor, the confrontation of harsh realities, and delayed gratification.
Which he links to Austrian economics, right?
Exactly. Austrian economics, which argues that bad businesses must be allowed to fail to clear out rot. Conversely, he frames Keynesian economics, which relies on government stimulus, managing aggregate demand, and prioritizing immediate short-term relief to avoid economic pain as a feelings-based system.
Yeah, he calls it a debt orgy where future generations pay for today's policy feels.
That's a very vivid description. He equates the desire to shield everyone from the consequences of their actions to an overbearing hypermaternal instinct gone toxic.
Interesting.
He uses the European sovereign debt crisis as his prime example. When Greece was on the verge of default in 2015 due to massive overspending, the European Central Bank and the Troika stepped in with massive bailouts.
Right. They didn't let them default.
No, they didn't. Riker argues they swapped mathematical accountability for solidarity filters. They prioritized the emotion of keeping the European Union family together and shielding Greek citizens from austerity over the cold, hard math of bankruptcy.
He's basically saying the system refuses to let failure happen naturally because the bureaucrats running it are too soft to stomach the pain of a true market correction.
That is exactly his point.
And he brings up some genuinely infuriating examples of the hypocrisy this breeds. Like, he points back to the 2008 financial crisis, specifically the AIG executives.
Oh, that story is infamous.
Millions of working class people are losing their homes to foreclosure. Their life savings are totally wiped out. And the executives at AIG, the very insurance giant that helped package the toxic subprime mortgages and who just received a massive $85 billion taxpayer bailout, what do?
Unbelievable.
They take a company retreat to the St. Regis Resort in Monarch Beach and charge $440,000 to their tab, including $23,000 just for spa treatments.
And they paid for it with money forcibly extracted from the taxpayers via the state. Riker views this not just as bad policy or corporate greed. He views it as a deliberate, structural insult.
He calls it a middle finger carved into the corpse of capitalism.
Yeah, he uses this to highlight the profound asymmetry of justice in a fiat system. If you or I steal $10,000, we go to federal prison. If a financial institution blows up the global economy for $10 billion, the state bails them out, and the executives get a hot stone massage on the taxpayer's dime.
It's just wild. And he targets the specific individuals running the system with the same vitriol. He takes aim at Janet Yellen, the former Fed chair and current Treasury Secretary.
Yeah, he really goes after her.
He notes that in 2021, as the money printer was running red hot, she publicly went on television and dismissed the looming massive inflation as just transitory.
We all remember that word.
Meanwhile, financial disclosures showed she was personally managing over $10 million in private hedge funds. Raker uses this incredibly savage analogy. He says trusting these bureaucrats is like a firefighter telling you your house isn't burning, while she's simultaneously siphoning gasoline from your garage into her Porsche.
That is a harsh comparison. Which brings us to the third pillar of his unholy trinity, the media.
Ah, yes. The narrative machine.
Riker asks, if the banks are committing the fraud and the state is legalizing it, how do they keep the public from revolting? The answer is narrative control. The media provides the cover.
They run defense.
Exactly. He points out the staggering hypocrisy of figures like Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. Dimon routinely goes on major financial news networks to confidently bash Bitcoin, calling it a fraud, a pet rock, or a tool for criminals.
I've seen those clips a dozen times.
Right. But simultaneously, behind the scenes, JP Morgan is quietly launching JPM Coin and building massive blockchain infrastructure to tokenize their own assets.
And the media rarely presses him on that contradiction. They just, play along with the narrative.
They rarely ask the hard questions.
Raker also points out the media's role in gaslighting the public about inflation. He notes how in 2020 and 2021, mainstream networks were practically cheerleading for massive stimulus checks, telling Americans that printing trillions was the only moral way to save the economy.
Yeah, it was presented as the only humane option.
Then, fast forward to 2023, when the inevitable, mathematically certain inflation actually hits the grocery store, those exact same networks pivot seamlessly.
Instantly.
Suddenly, they're blaming the inflation on Putin's price hike, or corporate greed, or supply chain bottlenecks. They completely ignore the trillions of dollars they demanded be printed out of thin air just 2 years prior.
It's the weaponization of short attention spans.
Listening to this, it feels exactly like a casino. But it's a casino where the house doesn't just control the odds of the blackjack tables. They also own the local newspaper that writes the glowing reviews of the casino, and they fund the police department that patrols the street outside to make sure no one sets up a competing game.
That's a perfect analogy for his unholy trinity.
But if the system is truly this captured by elite interests, and they have absolute control over the money printer, the legal framework, and the media narrative, why on earth would they ever let a decentralized, uncontrollable threat like Bitcoin survive? Why not just crush it?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question right there.
Mm-hmm.
And Riker's answer is fundamental to understanding the technology. He argues they're trying to kill it.
Through regulation and banking blockades.
Exactly. And media smears. But they literally can't. Why? Because Bitcoin isn't a company. It doesn't have a headquarters you can raid. It doesn't have a CEO you can subpoena or arrest.
There's no one to put in handcuffs.
Right. It is, at its core, just open source mathematics distributed across tens of thousands of nodes globally.
He makes a really chilling point about the power of the state versus the power of math. He references Ross Ulbricht, the founder of the Silk Road darknet market.
Yeah, that's a heavy example. Riker points to Ulbricht serving a double life sentence plus 40 years without parole as the ultimate example of the state's kinetic wrath.
The ultimate flex of state power.
The state can cage men. They can inflict violence on individuals who threaten their monopoly. But, as Riker argues, they cannot put shackles on mathematics.
You can't arrest an algorithm.
You cannot arrest a hashing algorithm. The Bitcoin code simply routes around censorship like a packet of data bypassing a broken router on the internet. If you ban mining in China, as they did in 2021, the machines just physically move to Texas or Kazakhstan, and the network adjusts its difficulty and keeps producing blocks every 10 minutes.
It's relentless. So if the legacy system is this soft, feelings-based bureaucracy that punishes hard work and relies on coercion, what is the psychological profile of the person who escapes it?
Well, this is where Riker explicitly tailors his message to men, specifically a men's rights or manosphere audience, focusing on what he calls mining masculinity and the proof of work ethos.
Okay, let's get into this, because this specific framing is totally central to the book's cultural thesis.
It is. Riker argues that interacting with the Bitcoin network, particularly at the mining level, is not just a technological process. It represents a cultural and psychological resurgence of primal masculine virtues.
And he explicitly lists these virtues.
Yeah, he lists them as an affinity for physical labor, a capacity for strategic violence or extreme competition, innate mechanical aptitude, and a very high tolerance for absolute, unmitigated risk.
He leans very heavily into evolutionary psychology to make this case. He argues that historically, for thousands of years, society relied entirely on the drive, aggression, and physical toughness of men to conquer frontiers, secure resources, build infrastructure, and defend borders.
Right, the traditional masculine role.
But in the modern fiat-driven bureaucracy, the world of endless HR departments, email jobs, and compliance officers, he claims society now actively shames those exact same traits, labeling them as toxic masculinity.
And he argues that millions of young men today feel trapped in a system that demands they suppress their most primal, biological instincts to build and conquer.
They feel pathologized for just acting like men, according to him.
Exactly. But Bitcoin, specifically through the brutal competition of proof-of-work mining, offers an escape hatch back to reality. It offers a raw, unforgiving system.
Yeah, Riker points out that the blockchain has absolutely no diversity quotas. It doesn't offer emotional coaching or care about your socioeconomic background.
It is a completely blind, impartial judge. It only asks one question every 10 minutes. Did you expend the energy and do the cryptographic work?
If yes, you get paid. If no, you get nothing.
It's beautifully brutal. And he shares these incredible, gritty, on-the-ground stories to illustrate this exact mindset.
Oh, the West Virginia story.
Yes. He talks about an ex-Marine living in a hollowed-out town in West Virginia. This guy's community had lost all its factory jobs to globalization and financialization.
Totally left behind by the fiat system.
Completely. But instead of complaining or waiting for a government handout, this ex-Marine took a rusty alternator out of an old broken-down Ford F-150. He spent weeks rewiring it, figuring out the electrical loads, and built a makeshift, off-grid power supply for a single ASIC Bitcoin mining rig.
That is so resourceful.
Right. Riker writes that the guy slapped the side of his roaring mining machine and told him, "This has more horsepower than my old pickaxe."
Wow. It's the classic pioneer instinct, The drive to mix your labor with the earth to generate value, but it's redirected away from physical gold and into cyberspace.
That's exactly how Riker frames it. Riker also uses the example of a Florida plumber to highlight the virtue of stoic risk tolerance in the face of immense emotional pressure.
The 2018 crash story.
Yeah, the massive 2018 crypto winter when Bitcoin crashed from $20,000 all the way down to around $3,000, losing over 80% of its fiat value.
A gut-wrenching drop.
It's devastating. This plumber's wife, absolutely terrified of the collapsing price, gave him an ultimatum to sell his Bitcoin, cut their losses, and put the money back in a safe bank account.
But he flat out ignored her.
Yeah.
Because according to Riker, this plumber had actually done the work. He had studied the math. He understood the mechanics of the Bitcoin halving cycles and knew the supply shock was coming.
He had conviction.
Right. So he held his position through the agonizing crash. And Riker writes that today, post-2021 bull runs, this same plumber docks a 42-foot yacht, literally named HODL, hold on for dear life, right next to the repossessed sailboats of ex-traditional finance hedge fund managers in Miami.
It's an aggressive anecdote.
It is. Riker uses it to declare spouses are temporary, the blockchain is forever.
Yeah, it is a stark, highly controversial framing,
Right.
But it underlines his core point about having masculine conviction in your own research in the face of emotional or societal pressure.
And he attempts to back up this demographic reality with hard data, too.
He does. He cites a 2023 North Dakota mining visa program designed to bring specialized technicians to the state's massive crypto farms.
And what were the numbers on that?
He notes that 94% of the applicants were male, mostly roughnecks, electrical engineers, and riggers from places like China, Russia, and Nigeria. Riker compares this influx of men seeking to mix their labor with cheap energy to the 1862 Homestead Act, where men rushed the unforgiving western frontier to claim physical land.
Okay, I understand the demographic reality he's pointing to with those stats, but framing this as a strictly masculine triumph feels a bit forced. I mean, he says things like, women birth children, men birth systems, and talks endlessly about bending reality to your will.
He definitely leans into the rhetoric.
But when you get down to the brass tacks of it, isn't the entire beauty of computer code and mathematics that it is fundamentally inherently genderless? Like, an Antminer S19 ASIC rig pulling 3,000 watts doesn't know or care if a man or a woman plugged it into the wall. Why does he insist on aggressively gendering a completely neutral mathematical protocol?
That's a very perceptive critique of his framework, and one many readers will likely have. Riker acknowledges technically that the code itself is a neutral arbiter, but he argues that the behaviors and psychological profiles required to successfully interact with proof of work at the infrastructure level are highly gendered.
Okay, how so?
The willingness to take catastrophic financial risks, the obsessive mechanical tinkering required to overclock hardware and manage heat dissipation, the willingness to operate in legal gray areas on the frontier of regulation. He argues these are statistically, culturally, and biologically overwhelmingly male traits.
He even brings in biology.
Oh yeah, he cites neurobiological studies showing male brains lighting up differently when visualizing 3D architectural structures, and references dopamine pathways in male primates related to risk-taking. He uses all this to argue that men are biologically wired for this specific type of high-stakes frontier conquest.
Well, the idea of the code itself being neutral perfectly bridges us into what is honestly one of the most fascinating paradoxes in the entire book.
It really is a massive pivot.
Because while Riker spends chapters attacking the toxic femininity of Fiat institutions and aggressively praising masculine red-pilled builders, he turns around and dedicates an entire incredible section to the women who are quietly weaponizing Bitcoin better than anyone else.
Yeah, Chapter 6, titled Orange-Pilled Matriarchs. This is where Riker reveals a deep pragmatism that kind of undercuts some of his earlier rhetoric.
It surprised me, honestly.
Despite his focus on masculine energy, he freely acknowledges that the fiat banking system, which he bluntly dismisses as institutionalized cuckoldry, fails absolutely everyone, regardless of gender.
It's an equal opportunity destroyer of wealth.
Exactly. And he observes, through intensive on-the-ground reporting, that women across the globe are adopting Bitcoin. But they aren't doing it for ideological purity or to conquer a frontier or to buy a yacht.
No, they're doing it for raw, pragmatic, life-or-death survival.
They're using it to escape failing states, abusive spouses, and collapsing economies. And fascinatingly, Riker actually makes the biological argument for why women are statistically better at holding Bitcoin than men.
The oxytocin study.
Right. He cites neuroscience labs at UCLA that study the hormone oxytocin. We usually think of oxytocin purely as the bonding hormone released during childbirth or breastfeeding. But Riker argues this hormonal spike fundamentally wires women for long-term generational time horizons.
So they're biologically incentivized to think about the survival of their offspring decades into the future.
Precisely. This relates to the economic concept of time preference.
Yeah.
A high time preference means you want immediate gratification spending today. A low time preference means you delay gratification for a larger future payoff.
And Riker argues women inherently have a lower time preference.
He brings the data to prove it, citing Coinmetrics on-chain data showing that female Bitcoin holders have an average retention rate of 5.2 years. They buy, they secure it, and they hold it as a fortress for their family.
And the men.
Men, on the other hand, have an average churn rate of just 11 months, constantly trading in and out of the market, rotating through various risky altcoins like, and this is a great quote, horny hummingbirds chasing the next shiny object.
Horny hummingbirds, that is so funny. But the examples he gives of these matriarchs in action are just mind-blowing. He talks about teenage Afghan girls in the city of Herat.
Such a powerful story.
Under the Taliban regime, women are forbidden from participating in the economy, let alone going to school. They are entirely cut off from the physical banking system. So what do? They use smuggled SpaceX Starlink satellite dishes to connect to the internet, completely bypassing the state-controlled ISPs.
And once online, they aren't just buying Bitcoin, they're interacting with the bleeding edge of the technology. Riker details how they are coding DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations.
Right, and for those unfamiliar, a DAO is essentially a company or a treasury run entirely by smart contracts on a blockchain, with no central CEO or physical bank account.
So they could pool funds globally without anyone being able to freeze the account.
Exactly. These girls are hiding complex Solidity programming textbooks inside dust jackets, disguised as traditional Quranic study guides.
The bravery is just astounding.
It is. They are earning Bitcoin through freelance coding and using these DAOs to secretly fund and manage underground women's schools, completely invisible to the physical patrols of the Taliban. The state controls the borders and the physical banks, but they cannot stop cryptographic math moving over a satellite connection in low Earth orbit.
It's beautiful. Riker also takes us to South America, to Peru, specifically Lima's Mercado Central, during a period of massive hyperinflation of the sol.
Right. When the central bank loses control and prices of basic goods double every few days, the physical currency becomes essentially useless for trade.
This anecdote is wild. The Peruvian mothers running the market stalls were bypassing the ATMs and the failing central bank completely.
Yeah, Riker describes women who had their Bitcoin wallet QR codes literally tattooed onto the palms of their hands.
Talk about skin in the game.
Literally. At 3 a.m. in the dark, they were scanning each other's palms with cheap Android phones, trading fractions of a Bitcoin Satoshis for sacks of rice and produce. They were treating hyperinflation not as a tragedy to cry over, but like a flea market where they simply bargain with harder money.
And it's crucial to note that this survival mechanism isn't limited to the developing world or authoritarian regimes either. He discusses a suburban divorcee in Dallas, Texas.
A lightning network story.
Yeah. She was in a brutal legal battle trying to protect her daughter's college fund from her ex-husband's aggressive, highly paid lawyers who were trying to seize half her assets. So she funneled the cash into Bitcoin, but she didn't just leave it on a public exchange. She used the Lightning Network.
Okay, so how does that work? If the blockchain is a transparent public ledger, how do you hide money from a team of lawyers?
That's where the technology gets incredible. The base layer of Bitcoin is public. Every transaction is recorded forever. Lawyers use expensive chain analysis tools to track those movements. But the Lightning Network is a layer 2 scaling solution. It allows two parties to open a payment channel on the main chain, but then conduct thousands of transactions off-chain, instantly and completely privately.
Oh.
The routing of the funds through Lightning nodes is onion routed, very much like the Tor browser, meaning each node only knows the hop immediately before and after it. It obscures the total path.
So it's untraceable.
Basically, yeah. She used a simple non-custodial app called a Moon Wallet, spun up a channel, and moved the funds. When the lawyers subpoenaed her empty Coinbase accounts, they found absolutely nothing.
That is brilliant.
Her strategy was beautifully simple. The lawyers bill $600 an hour to trace crypto on the public main chain, but she spent 0 hours learning how to step completely outside their jurisdiction via layer 2 privacy.
She just mathematically opted out of the legal bureaucracy.
Exactly.
But the most intense, visceral example Riker gives is from the Syrian refugee camps. He interviews a Damascus-born midwife who helps pregnant women fleeing the violence of the Assad regime.
This one stuck with me.
These women are carrying the entirety of their family's wealth. If they carry gold or cash, border guards or smugglers will rob them or confiscate it. So they memorize 12-word seed phrases, the BIP79 cryptographic master key to their Bitcoin wallets, and walk across the border with their wealth stored entirely inside their own minds.
The brain wallet. It's incredible. The midwife herself, though, took it a step further. Because memory can fail under extreme trauma, she used a hardware wallet, a physical device like a USB drive that holds private keys offline, in cold storage, totally safe from hackers. Specifically, a Trezor.
And what she did with it is just intense.
Yeah, she showed Riker where she had physically embedded it, tattooing over a scar from a C-section to hide the device against her body. She told him, "The Assad regime can seize gold jewelry, but they'll never find my UTXOs," referring to unspent transaction outputs, the technical term for the fractions of Bitcoin she controlled.
It's just staggering. These women are acting as modern-day digital smugglers, moving absolute value past men with machine guns. It makes me wonder, reading these chapters, it seems Riker deeply respects anyone, male or female, who uses hard math to defy soft institutions.
He really does.
So is his real enemy actually femininity, as he aggressively claims in the earlier chapters? Or is it just the bloated, corrupt, risk-averse bureaucracy that he happens to lazily associate with that word?
That is the glaring contradiction at the heart of his thesis, and it makes the book fascinating. He despises the safety-first, feelings-driven bureaucracy of the state, which he rigidly genders as feminine.
Right.
Yet, when confronted with the fierce, protective, uncompromising survivalist pragmatism of these mothers and refugees, which is undeniably a manifestation of maternal femininity, he holds profound reverence for it.
Exactly.
It suggests his true allegiance isn't to a gender at all, but to whoever is willing to embrace the cold, hard reality of thermodynamic money to secure their own sovereignty.
Which brings us perfectly to the macro level. We've talked about individuals surviving, but Riker argues that Bitcoin is fundamentally shifting the geopolitical chessboard for entire nation states.
The energy warfare chapter.
Yes, this is the concept of energy warfare. He claims Bitcoin is transforming raw energy directly into unconfiscatable wealth and completely bypassing international sanctions.
This is where the book scales up from personal finance to grand strategy. Riker introduces the concept of energy mercenaries.
Okay, let's explain this.
To understand this, we have to look at the Texas power grid run by ERCOT. The Texas grid is famously independent from the rest of the U.S., and because it relies heavily on unpredictable wind and solar, it can be highly unstable.
It struggles to balance baseload generation with peak demand.
Right. In 2023, during a severe winter storm, the grid was on the verge of collapse, and the grid operators actually paid Bitcoin miners $60 million to shut down their machines.
Wait, I remember reading those headlines. People were furious. They were saying, Why are we paying tech bros millions of dollars not to mine fake internet money while people are freezing in their homes?
I think that is the mainstream media narrative. But Riker completely flips the script by explaining the actual physics of grid balancing.
Right, because grids are tricky.
Electrical grids have no way to store massive amounts of energy. What is produced must be consumed instantly. When a grid has excess power, say, the wind is blowing hard at night when no one is using electricity, the price of power plummets and energy companies lose money, which discourages them from building more renewable infrastructure.
So they need a buyer.
Yes. Bitcoin miners buy this cheap excess power, acting as a constant reliable buyer of last resort. But, and this is the key, they are a controllable load resource. They are the only massive industrial energy consumer on the planet that can power down in 3 seconds flat.
So they act like a sponge.
Exactly. They are a kinetic battery. When the grid is stressed, like during that winter storm when families desperately needed heat, the miners power down instantly. They release all that electrical capacity back to the grid to keep hospitals and homes warm, and ERCOT pays them for providing that emergency flexibility through what are called demand response programs.
So they are actually balancing the grid in real time, making the entire system more resilient.
That completely changes the narrative on energy consumption, doesn't it?
It really does. But Riker takes this concept of energy monetization beyond just balancing domestic grids. He takes it to the theater of global war. He points out that the U.S. Treasury recently released a report officially calling Bitcoin a sanctions erosion vector.
Which is essentially government speak for, we can no longer stop our enemies from making money. For decades, the United States has used the SWIFT banking network as its primary financial weapon. SWIFT is the messaging system that allows correspondent banks around the world to settle cross-border payments. If a country misbehaves or goes to war, the U.S. leverages its power to cut that country out of SWIFT.
It effectively exiles them from global trade.
Riker calls SWIFT Fiat's Berlin Wall. But he says Bitcoin is the hyperloop boring right through his foundations.
Because Bitcoin doesn't care about correspondent banks. It settles globally in 10 minutes, permissionlessly. And countries are waking up to this. Look at El Salvador.
Oh, Bukele's strategy.
President Nayib Bukele didn't just pass a law making Bitcoin legal tender. He looked at his country's natural resources and weaponized their volcanoes. They tapped into the massive geothermal vents at Lago Ilopango.
Geothermal energy is incredibly powerful, using the Earth's internal heat to create steam and spin turbines. But it's often located in remote areas where you can't easily transport the electricity.
Right, you lose energy over long transmission lines.
El Salvador solved this by building state-owned mining facilities right at the source of the volcano. They are plugging ASICs directly into the Earth's crust.
They are literally turning volcanic steam into digital gold. Riker calls it the first national security strategy in human history where the ammunition is math and the artillery is thermodynamics.
It's a poetic way to put it, and it's not just small, agile nations adopting this strategy. Riker points to the geopolitical giant, Russia.
Yeah, this is where it gets really serious.
After the 2022 invasion of Ukraine and the subsequent heavy Western sanctions, Russian energy companies were cut off from SWIFT and couldn't easily sell their oil and gas to Europe. They were sitting on massive amounts of stranded energy.
So what did they do?
They utilized the stranded flare gas in the remote frozen oil fields of Siberia to power immense Bitcoin mining farms.
Yeah.
By December 2022, Riker notes, Russian miners were earning $4 million daily.
Earning $4 million a day and a completely unconfiscatable, censorship-resistant currency that the U.S. Treasury literally cannot touch.
Precisely. Riker coins a brilliant term for these mining farms. Digital embassies. They are extraterritorial wealth hubs protected by the unbreakable laws of physics and cryptography, rather than by military force or diplomatic treaties.
Russia is effectively turning blacklisted, unsellable hydrocarbons into immutable ledger entries on the global blockchain.
Yep. He also mentions the Seychelles in the Indian Ocean, describing these offshore crypto enclaves as GitHub with gun rights.
GitHub with gun rights. Wow.
He tells the story of an anonymous crypto whale, a massive holder going by the alias Poseidon. This individual funded the construction of a massive desalination plant in the Caribbean, providing fresh water to an entire island, entirely through obscured offshore Bitcoin transactions.
Just bypassing the whole system.
He bypassed all traditional banking compliance, all international tax authorities, and all regulatory red tape. He just deployed capital via code.
Listening to this, trying to imagine the old legacy system fighting this technology, it sounds like a landlord trying to ban the laws of gravity in their apartment building. You know, you can write the rule in the lease agreement, you can put up signs, but you cannot enforce it against physics.
Great analogy.
But I have to ask, if a massive sovereign entity like the US government or the BRICS nations realizes they can't beat it, and they actually decide to co-opt it, what if they start mining it on a massive scale and holding it in their strategic reserves? Doesn't Bitcoin just become the new ultimate weapon of the very state bureaucracies that Riker despises? Doesn't the empire just strike back in digital gold?
That's the ultimate endgame scenario, right?
Sure.
Riker's counter-argument is that Bitcoin, by its very nature, forces the state to change its fundamental behavior.
Okay, how?
A state operating on a fiat standard is a leviathan unbound. It can fund endless foreign wars and bloat its domestic bureaucracies forever simply by printing money and stealing from the citizens through the hidden tax of inflation.
Because there's no limit.
Right. But a state operating on a Bitcoin standard is leashed to reality. It must physically earn its wealth through energy dominance, technological innovation, or direct, transparent taxation, because they cannot arbitrarily print more Bitcoin to fund a deficit.
So it forces fiscal discipline on the Leviathan.
Exactly. It mathematically neutralizes their ability to infinitely expand via the money printer.
Fascinating. So if nation states are starting to realize this massive geopolitical shift is underway, the next logical question is how the next generation, the people who will actually inherit this earth, are preparing for it. And that brings us to the final core topic of the book, the 2025 supercycle and the educational exodus. Riker makes some incredibly bold near-term predictions here.
Very bold. He focuses heavily on the internal economic mechanics of the Bitcoin network, specifically the event known as the halving.
Let's break down the halving.
Every 4 years, or exactly every 210,000 blocks, the amount of new Bitcoin created and rewarded to miners every 10 minutes is automatically cut in half. When Bitcoin started, it was 50 coins every 10 minutes, then 25, then 12.5. then 6.25.
And in 2024, it dropped to 3.125.
It is a hard-coded programmatic supply shock. Riker calls it a digital scarcity engine that mathematically increases the stock-to-flow ratio of the asset, making it harder than gold.
And he uses historical market data to show the explosive impact of this mechanism, right? The 2016 halving was followed by a 3,000% market rally. The 2020 halving sparked a 700% surge.
Right.
He argues that the recent 2024 halving has lit a slow-burning fuse under a macroeconomic powder keg. He predicts a 2025 supercycle where the absolute unyielding scarcity of a hard-capped 21 million total bitcoins collides violently with the sudden realization of 8 billion people that their local fiat currencies are structurally designed to decay.
It's a perfect storm. But he pairs this purely financial prediction with a massive societal cultural prediction. He claims we are witnessing the real-time cultural rejection of what he calls Marxist academia in favor of what he terms monetary thermodynamics.
The educational exodus.
Yes. He points to a steep, verifiable decline in traditional university enrollments for degrees centered on social theory, like sociology and gender studies.
The numbers he pulls from the Department of Education are stark. He cites figures showing women's studies enrollment cratering 61% since 2018, while applied cryptography and computer science programs have exploded by 290%.
That's a massive shift in human capital.
He says young men in particular are waking up to the reality that debating pronouns in a seminar doesn't pay the rent in an inflationary environment, but understanding electrical engineering, managing heat loads, and securing network hash rate creates generational unconfiscatable wealth.
He provides a fantastic, highly illustrative anecdote from the University of Texas at Austin to highlight this. According to Riker's reporting, the university quietly swapped a low-attendance class titled Deconstructing Whiteness for a new, rigorous seminar called Monetary Thermodynamics.
And what happened?
The enrollment for that specific time slot tripled overnight.
Wow.
The students are looking at the economic reality around them and voting with their exorbitant tuition dollars for hard, measurable skills over soft, subjective theory.
And they aren't just learning the theory, they're getting hands-on immediately. Look at the story he tells about UC Berkeley.
Oh, Clara Wu, yes.
The campus facilities department noticed a massive, inexplicable spike in electricity usage coming from a specific undergraduate dorm building. They investigated, assuming someone had plugged in a bunch of space heaters or something.
But no.
Instead, they found a freshman engineering student named Clara Wu who had hidden a 12 ASIC mining farm in her tiny dorm room, cleverly disguised under a tarp as a long-term 3D printer project.
She actually crawled into the walls and rewired the dorm's laundry room circuits to bypass the individual room meters so she could pull massive amounts of free, university-subsidized energy to mint Bitcoin.
It's technically unauthorized and totally dangerous, but Riker praises the raw entrepreneurial ingenuity of it. He notes a cultural shift on campuses, pointing out that merchandise at university co-ops featuring slogans like "learn proof of work, not pronouns," are completely selling out.
The youth are realizing that the old prescribed path, go into massive student debt for a soft skill degree, work in a monitored cubicle, save your money in a decaying fiat bank account, is a mathematically guaranteed trap.
The opportunity cost of missing this technological shift is almost incomprehensible. Riker brings up Jeff Bezos to illustrate this.
The 2013 tweet.
Back in 2013, Bezos casually tweeted that Bitcoin was cool, but despite seeing the technology early, he didn't instruct Amazon's treasury to buy any. Riker runs the math. He calculates that if Bezos had taken just $1 million of Amazon's massive cash reserves and invested it into Bitcoin back then, instead of just tweeting an observation, that single $1 million position would be worth $6.9 billion today.
That is a staggering, almost nauseating missed opportunity for a corporate treasure.
It really is. But let me pose one final question about this vision of the future. Riker is predicting a total institutional collapse of the old legacy system and a cultural renaissance driven purely by mathematical self-interest, open source code, and energy production.
Right.
But isn't there a severe systemic risk here? Doesn't this digital primogeniture, as he calls it, just create a new, unassailable class of ultra-rich tech lords? Are we not just replacing the old, corrupt fiat bankers with a new, equally entrenched class of cryptographic oligarchs who simply had the luck or foresight to buy in early?
It's a vital critique, and perhaps the most important question about the future of this space. Riker's defense against the new oligarch theory is rooted in the equality of the protocol's rules.
Okay, unpack that.
He argues that yes, the new elite, the Bitcoin elite, will possess massive wealth, but they will have earned their position through foresight, enduring massive market volatility, risk-taking, and physical energy expenditure, rather than through political favors, bailouts, and central bank money printing.
So they earned it.
Furthermore, and this is the crucial distinction, because they cannot change the consensus rules of the Bitcoin network to benefit themselves at the expense of others, their vast wealth does not grant them the power to debase the currency of the poor.
I see.
A fiat billionaire can lobby the government to print money, which dilutes the savings of the working class. A Bitcoin billionaire can only spend their Bitcoin. They cannot print more.
So the rules apply equally to everyone.
The rules of the protocol apply exactly the same to the billionaire whale sitting in a penthouse in Dubai as they do to the Peruvian mother scanning a QR code in a night market. It is an inequality of wealth, certainly, but it enforces a total unbreakable equality of rules, which Riker forcefully argues is a massive evolutionary upgrade over the current corrupt system.
Which brings us to the end of this truly incredible, expansive journey. We have synthesized a massive amount of information today. We started at the atomic level with the literal physics of energy money, exploring how the SHA-256 algorithm translates real-world thermodynamics and wasted flare gas into unforgeable digital scarcity.
We examined Riker's blistering, uncompromising critique of fiat's institutional capture by the unholy trinity of banks, states, and media. We explored his controversial, heavily manosphere-influenced framing of Keynesian debt cycles as toxic femininity and the hypocrisy of the bailouts.
We looked at the reclaiming of the masculine proof-of-work ethos and the desire to build on the digital frontier, but we also uncovered the incredible, paradoxical underground network of matriarchs, Afghan schoolgirls, and Syrian refugees who are using this exact same math for raw, real-world survival against deeply oppressive regimes.
And we zoomed all the way out to the macro level to see the impending energy warfare of nation-states, from Texas grid balancing to Russian digital embassies, leading right up to his bold predictions for the mathematically driven 2025 supercycle and the youth exodus toward monetary thermodynamics.
I want to remind you, the listener, that everything we discussed and analyzed today was a deep dive into the ideas presented in the ebook Energy Money by Conrad Riker. If this conversation sparked your curiosity or challenged your worldview, we strongly urge you to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now to buy this ebook and read it for yourself.
The depth, The technical explanations and the sheer provocation in his writing are something you really have to experience firsthand to fully grapple with.
Absolutely. And be sure to follow at Conrad's Riker on Substack for more unfiltered financial reality and ongoing analysis directly from the author. And of course, please hit that like and subscribe button for our show right now so you never miss a deep dive into the ideas shaping our world. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final deeply provocative thought to mull over on your own.
Something that builds on the thermodynamic reality Riker has laid out, projecting it into the far future.
Exactly. Riker argues beautifully that energy cannot be destroyed, only transformed, and that Bitcoin, through proof of work, is the ultimate unbreakable battery for human labor. But if that is true, and the hard-coded rules of the math truly cannot be broken by any state or corporation, we know for a fact that the final fraction of the 21 millionth Bitcoin is scheduled to be mined in the year 2140.
The absolute hard cap.
So, what happens to the innate human drive to conquer, to build, and to secure limitless wealth when the absolute limit of absolute scarcity is finally reached? Once the last drop of digital gold is mined from the cryptographic earth and the block subsidy drops to zero, does humanity finally find peace in a stable, unchanging, perfectly balanced ledger? Or is our nature so restless that we will just invent a brand new, even more complex game to dominate? Thanks for listening, keep questioning the system, and we'll see you on the next Deep Dive.